All right, guys, back here for segment number 8 of Jog Your Mind, talking all about how to pace a 5K. Now, I'm sure all of you guys have figured out some sort of strategy that's worked so far. My goal in this episode is to not change everything that you're doing, but rather bring some, granular detail into the thinking behind what you guys are doing when you guys are out there racing. The first thing I think of when I think of pacing a 5K is to breaking it into smaller pieces. If you think about, the European way of racing, they're looking at this in terms of 5 1K intervals. Here in the United States, we're thinking of 3 separate sections, or the rule of thirds: 0 to 1, 1 to 2, and 2 to 3. Now, this isn't a bad way of thinking, and neither one is better than the other, but you have to work with the strategy that works best with your mind. And what I think is important here is that you don't have to arrest yourself to the idea of mile splits: 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. You can look at it more simply at a 10,000 foot level of start, middle, and end. And that rule of thirds can be more of like, I want to get out hard, I want to maintain, and then I want to run fast at the end, which is a great way of looking at a race. And then adding the granular detail of what do you want to do and how are you specifically going to execute it. The number one thing that I get from athletes, and especially one of the things that I asked on Instagram, was, what do you guys want to know about pacing? So that's actually where we're going to start today. I'm actually going to open up here and we're going to take a look at what you guys asked on Instagram. And the first one is, how do you not slow down the second mile but maintain? Well, I think what's super important here is that to maintain the first mile, the second mile, is you have to adjust how you're getting out. And if you're not able to maintain your pace inside the first mile, that's just going to be really, really challenging for you to hold on. So that first mile, you need to probably back off a little bit more. I would look at it like this: is go back and look through the last 3 or 4 races. How have you opened your race compared to, any of the others? Was it always fast first mile, second fell off, third got faster? For example, 6:30, 7:30, 7 flat. That's a 7-minute average across the board. So what's the point in going out at 6:30? One of the big reasons that I see people get stuck in going out really, really hard and then struggling in that second mile, and again, this isn't to anyone specific, this often happens because they get stuck in the idea that if they don't, then they have no chance of running fast whatsoever if they don't get out fast. And that's just a lack of trust that you have inside yourself as an athlete. And it's also a lack of understanding in how you race best. And I'll talk about that after we get through the questions about how do we build trust and what are kind of the phases of ascending as an athlete. No, it's how do you what are the ways that you can progress your trust with yourself and understand how you race and what methodology or what works best for you. I think what's super, super important here is that if you find yourself in this place of slow second mile, you're just getting out too hard. You're redlining yourself too soon, and then you have to fall back so then you can try and push that third mile. It's very rare that an athlete gets out really hard and then purposefully slows down, and they're maintaining their effort. No matter what, there's going to be a back off in effort that second mile because of a response to what is happening in that first mile. And so realistically, if that 6:30, 7:30, 7 flat is happening to you, back off to 7 flat for that first mile. And then, even a consistent race. And we'll talk about consistent versus progressive versus responsive. Let's take a look at the next question here. This one made me laugh. If you guys don't follow AJ Runs HB, best power walker out there. So I only take pacing strategies from AJ. That one's, that's the best out there. One of the questions, which mile should be the fastest? This is a super tricky question because it really depends on the course. I think that what you have to do is, instead of looking at fast, I want you guys to think about effort. It's just a subtle tweak, but I want you guys to think of effort being the most important assessment tool that you have in your toolbox as an athlete. Is your greatest amount of effort should probably be in the last mile, so to speak, or the last third of the race. So that's the most important piece, is that last mile, because that's where you're going to have the greatest chance of moving, or in terms of your position within the race has the greatest chance of moving. So, you could see yourself go from 5th to 8th in that last mile. So you need to be able to have some gas pedal left. And especially if you're an athlete that finds yourself falling back inside of a race in that last mile, then it's more than likely that you not have a lack of fitness, but don't have a lack of understanding in how to pace yourself for that course or for the race itself. Next question here. Will you be discussing the speed changes of sea bugs in this upcoming episode? If you don't know what sea bugs are, those are shrimp and lobsters. They are little scuttly sea bugs. This is kind of a funny inside joke with Miss Lindsay Keel. So Miss Lindsay, this one's for you. Last one here. How do you train for the second mile of a race? Again, a lot of that training isn't so much about workouts, but it's one thing I do want to talk about. There's no perfect workout that is going to prep you for a specific outcome inside of a race. It just gives you the ability and the better understanding. So one of the things I talked about was the idea that our brains are prediction machines. If you go into a race with the expectation that it's going to be easy and then it's hard, you're almost always going to spiral and go into a negative space. If you go into a race and you have an expectation that it's going to be hard and it's easy, that's a win. If you go into a race expecting it's hard and it is hard, you're prepared. And that's a really, really small but key distinction, is that if you know that mile 2 requires that you just stay consistent and trust yourself, and you tell yourself, I got to trust myself, I have to stay on the gas that second mile. And then when you get into that second mile, you go, okay, it's time. It's time for me to go do what I came out to do. And the only way that that's possible is if you set yourself up. So let's talk about 2 things here. The first one is, should you use mile splits in terms of mile 1, mile 2, mile 3? I think it's good, but sometimes that can be a little much for our brains to try to handle. I think if you are going to use mile splits, give yourself a range. If you're targeting a 7-minute first mile, say, hey, 7:05 to 6:55. Anywhere inside there, happy camper. I'm good with that. I'm happy with it. And if you hear something that you don't like on either side of that, if you got out a little bit too fast, again, sometimes getting out a little bit too fast, if you've got the fitness and you feel good, that's awesome. But realistically, that first mile should feel a lot like a tempo. It shouldn't feel, and you shouldn't be breathing super hard and feeling like you're at all out within that first mile. If you find yourself there within the first half mile, you just know that you need to back off. It's too hard for the duration of the race that you're going to, and the effort that you're going to put out there. So this comes now to the discussion of effort. To me, there's really kind of 3 levels. The first is the idea of consistent effort. I'm going to explain this in terms of mile splits because it tends to be a little bit an easier way for people to understand it. But you can also think of this in terms of effort. So a consistent race, if we're thinking of this in terms of 3 miles, I'm going to leave off that last 200 meters. 7 minutes, 7 minutes, 7 minutes. Each mile, consistent. Boom, 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 boom. Being able to go out and do that is kind of the first level. Is like, all right, I went out, I ran every single mile the same. And what you will notice is that throughout that, your effort is going to escalate to maintain that pace, if that is close to your race pace. The next level, again, effort is going to increase throughout to go faster, faster, and faster. And that is a progressive model where you might go 7:10, 7 flat, 6:50. That's a progressive model where you're getting a little bit faster throughout the whole race, and your effort is going to increase throughout the whole race. And so the difference between the two is really about having control on the front end and trusting yourself to be a little bit slower so that you can be a little bit faster. Depending on the kind of course that's ahead of you, either model may be the right choice, but only you're going to know based on your experience, either having raced that in the past or understanding where your strengths and weaknesses are as an individual athlete. The last, and I think the highest level, is what I call responsive racing. And this is where you may have a very fast first mile that is completely within your control because it's downhill. It could flatten out on a course, and you could, maintain or even back off a little bit to preserve your effort. And the effort is still a little bit more than the first mile. And then that third mile could be uphill to get back to the finish or the start, depending on if it's a loop course or, point to point, whatever kind of course it might be. It may be more challenging in that third mile. And again, may not be realistic to have, a progressive race model or a consistent race model. And the effort throughout is either continuously getting a little bit more challenging or maintaining, and you're able to respond to what is happening in front of you. And a lot of you guys right now are focused on time, and where the responsive model comes in and changes, and why I say it's a higher level is quite often that responsive model now involves something that we haven't talked about at all this episode: other people. And other people being in a race and responding to the moves of other people. So no longer are we worried about trying to just get a PR and trying to go faster and faster and faster. But instead, we're trying to focus on how do we win a tactical race? How do we, get more points for our team and move around a competitor team, things like that. So now the role of other people comes in, and you have to know what you're capable of. So the key component here is understanding how many matches you have to burn. It doesn't matter if it's a consistent race model, progressive or responsive model, but the reality is that the underlying factor of how to have success in racing is understanding what the effort needs to feel like. So I don't have a download this week, but I have 3 workouts in here that you guys are absolutely welcome to try in the postseason. And I think are really helpful. And one thing that I think can really change how you look at racing and how to, put yourself in the best place possible is to be able to make your workouts as race specific at this point in the season as possible. So if you're doing, 1K reps or mile reps or even shorter reps, try to get out at your normal acceleration for a race, settle in and accelerate. Or even just getting to your race pace after a hard acceleration and trying to settle in and relaxing at your goal 5K pace. This is a really, really great way for you to just tell your body, teach your body how to react, how to respond inside that, and that you're going to feel that as the workout moves on, it's just going to get a little bit harder. And that's how a race should naturally progress. So to answer, some of the questions here, how do you train for mile 2? You have to do it inside your workouts. You have to put yourself in those higher stress scenarios and even go beyond what your goal 5K pace is, so that you kind of have these boundaries of this is, my pace on a slow course. This is my pace on a fast course or sea level course, since we're here in Colorado. And then this thing in the middle is kind of where I have been running in races lately, and training there, or 10 to 15 seconds faster, per mile, 5 seconds faster per mile even, is plenty to get you that next response. And you really have to build trust in what you're capable of. The people that race the best know what they're capable of, and that's why they're so dangerous on race day, is that they can show up, they know what they're capable of, and then they are going to make that race play out to their advantage. So again, if you go back through all of the last 7 episodes that we've recorded, the number one thing I ask you guys to do is self-assess. And in all of the questions that you guys shot to me on Instagram and put out there, as we go back through it, I want you guys to go back through your races. Go through your races and start with the very first race of the season up until now, and write down each of your 3-mile splits. What did you run? Mile 1, mile 2, mile 3. And, how did you race it? Did you have a really hard start, slow middle, faster end? How did you race these things? And then you're going to be able to kind of figure out, what should I be opening my first mile in these days? And how does that need to feel? So then you can take that to practice on your next workout and try to go that pace and then progress throughout a workout. I always have my athletes progress their workouts and progress their paces. It's naturally a great way to understand what you're capable of and how much energy you have in the tank. So that's what I'm going to leave you guys with today. I hope that helps answer some questions about mile 2. It's really based on how hard you go out in terms of mile 1. So if you're struggling there in mile 2, back off in mile 1. Trust yourself, trust your training. That's what I've got for you guys for segment number 8 today. I look forward to seeing you guys for segment number 9. See you guys next week.